In this section, creating the main nav will build out all functionality and presentation of the primary navigation. This is a pretty deep section, as building our main nav involves pseudo classes, absolute, relative, and fixed positioning, plus a bunch more like CSS animations. In this video, starting the nav, we'll begin by creating the cleanest HTML possible, and then we'll plug in the basic CSS to get it started. So this is what we're going for, a typical horizontal navigation. Some of the items have a drop-down menu. We also have the shark logo over there on the left-hand side of the nav bar that's kind of overhanging nicely. Let's jump right in and type out the HTML we need first. We'll start with this nice big fat HTML comment. As you may have noticed, I like these big guys because it's easier to locate the parts of my code I need quickly. We'll wrap everything in the HTML5 nav element and apply the grouping class because I know I'll be floating everything in there, so the clear fix will eventually be necessary so that the container doesn't collapse. I'll now add a figure element which will wrap my image. Next, I'll start an unordered list with the class of primary nav. It was long ago determined that it's very semantic to use a list for navigation because it's essentially a list of links. I'll start with 4 list items, and I'll put an anchor tag inside. I'm using this Emmet shorthand, which is a plugin for Sublime, which I talked about in an earlier video. I'll also use the hashtag for the href of each anchor tag, and then I'll type in the name of each link, and I'm putting them in the wrong spot. And we end up with a shark and 4 links all stacked vertically. So we need to lay these 4 links out horizontally like blocks. So we'll do that with floats and a few other properties. So in our CSS, we'll find the big block comment for the navigation, and we'll target the primary nav. Let's use a special type of descendant selector that only targets the first level of list items. This is important. I'm doing this because later we'll nest another unordered list within these list items to achieve the dropdown. If I use the typical descendant selector, something like primary nav li with no greater than symbol like this, that targets any and every li inside of primary nav. So children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, etc. If I only want to target direct children, I'll use this selector, which is called the child combinator. The greater than sign between the elements ensures we are only targeting direct children. Alright, so let's just float those list items left. That's a start, lots more to do. Let's use the same type of child combinator to target only direct children anchors of direct children LIs of primary nav. So it's kind of the same thing we did before, except we're adding one more level, and we're doing it for the same exact reason. So we're going to add padding of 25 pixels to the top, 0 to the left and right. We'll make it a width. Each one will be 150 pixels wide. And we'll give each one a border left of 1 pixel solid in this gray color. It's now starting to loosely resemble our nav. And here's going to be the kicker for code. And I'll drop in this whole rule set. This is a more familiar descendant selector for some of the styles that will apply to the main navigation items as well as the drop-down navigation items, nav lia. This is a nice dry approach, so we don't have to repeat this code later for the drop-down menu. So basically we're setting the font family to Arial. We have this text color, and we're using text transform uppercase, and this is going to make sure that I can type in lowercase for the navigation items in the HTML. But it's going to transform each one of those letters to uppercase. This way, if I decide later, regular case is better than all uppercase, then I can change it in one place instead of updating all the HTML. We have a font size, we're aligning the text center, and then we're also adding a transition like we learned in the last section that's going to transition the background color over 0.15 seconds. So we'll save that, and now we'll look at it. And there we go. We have starting to resemble something, but we have some problems. The one problem we have is our anchor tags are inline elements. So what's happening is they're not actually behaving like block level elements. So one of the things we can do is we can actually float them to the left as well. So we'll say float left. And there you go. Now that's looking a lot better. Let's target the focus and hover states. So underneath that last rule set, we'll add another. And this is going to target the focus, the hover, as well as another state, the active class. So this isn't a state necessarily like you would think of a focus state or hover state, but this is going to be the active state, which is really a class that we're going to apply to elements to signify that you're on that page. And it's going to be the same as the hover state. So that's a background color of this red color, and we're making the text white. So now when we refresh it, we get the hover and focus state, which is good. The only thing we have to do is figure out the position of this nav bar and push the whole thing to the right, because right now it's sitting underneath our image. So let's float the entire nav bar to the right. So we'll go back up to right above our first selector, and we'll type in primary nav, float right. Now this works out fairly well. We'll just have the entire nav sitting on top of the shark. We could fix this by floating the shark to the left, but a few nice features can be achieved instead by using absolute positioning, which is what we'll get to in the third video in this section. To wrap up, we built the HTML and most of the CSS for the first layer of the nav. In the next video, we'll learn about how pseudo classes can help with certain issues in our navigation.